Life did not work out for the family of young Daniel in Tel Aviv as they hoped, so they moved back to France. As they moved back to France, young Daniel and his mom tried to build a new life, but tragically the Holocaust began. Germany occupied France, and strict anti-Jewish laws were put in place, the beginning of the Holocaust for French Jewry. The laws were that after 6 o'clock there was absolute curfew. Any Jew that was caught outside after 6 would be killed, and that every single child, adult, woman, man, it didn't matter, who is Jewish would have to wear a large yellow Star of David on their clothing. Young Daniel abided by the laws. He went one day to play at his friend's home, and as he's playing with his friend, the game was engaging and fun, and he had to continue playing, and he realized that suddenly the time has passed and he is long past the curfew. Young Daniel was terrified. 6 o'clock went by and he has to get back home. He has a large Star of David on his shirt and he needs to get back. So he turned his shirt inside out, wore it so the Star of David did not show, and he started walking home, hoping that he would not get caught or seen by any Nazi. As he's walking down the street, suddenly he sees the terrifying image of a German Nazi soldier. Daniel walks closer and closer to the wall, and he realizes there's no way out of it. The German soldier sees him, comes over to him, and instead of killing him, which is what Daniel thought would happen, the German soldier hugs him, kisses him, pulls out his wallet, shows Daniel a picture of his own family, of his own children back in Germany, and tells Daniel how much he reminds him of his own son. He didn't stop at hugging and kissing Daniel. He gave him money. And it's at that point that Daniel realized that human nature can be very complicated, and he wants to be a psychologist when he grows up. The same soldier who he thought would kill him ended up kissing him and giving him money. Daniel decided he'll become a psychologist, and of course, he is the famous Daniel Kahneman, who won a Nobel Prize laureate, and he won it for teaching us how we think differently. Famously, he wrote the book Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, and he writes there about the existence of System 1 and System 2. System 1 is the ability of a person to think and respond in a split second. It's when someone throws a basketball at your face and you quickly catch it. It's when someone tells you, what's 2 plus 2, and you immediately answer them. What's your name? You don't think, you answer right away. That is System 1. System 2 is the more deliberate, thoughtful, and detailed kind of thinking, the kind that thinks long-term and tries processing things in more detail. If someone asks you what 2 plus 2 is, you can immediately fire it out of System 1. But if someone asks you how much 15 times 17 is, you're going to need a System 2. And so we have these two systems. It is impossible for us to survive with only one of those systems. If you are not able to respond right away when someone throws a basketball at your face, and you start deliberating and thinking long term, your nose will be hurt badly. And so each of these systems is vital and necessary, and that's one of the great foundations of Professor Kahneman's discoveries. When we think of Parshat Tisa and the sin of the golden calf, this idea really opens up a really very important window. The Jewish people have just left Egypt. They received the Torah at Sinai, and in Sinai they are told, you will have no other gods. They're told, Lo yelecha Elohim acharim al panai. They're told, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God asher hotziticha me'eretz Mitzrayim. Not even 40 days go by, and the Jewish people find themselves dancing around a golden calf, saying, Ele Elohecha Yisrael, this is your God Israel, asher ha'elucha me'eretz Mitzrayim, that took you out of Egypt. How is it even possible that a people who saw God doesn't have a body, but they were able to be prophets, who were hearing Anochi Hashem Elokecha, went on to commit a sin as horrible as idol worship? The rabbis tell us that the foundation for this is their panic. The Jewish people panicked. They saw the fact that Moshe didn't come. Vayar ha'am ki boshesh Moshe lavo. They saw that Moses did not come, and the rabbis say boshesh is a short for bashesh. Moses was delayed by just 6 hours, and they already were looking to worship something else. How did that happen? How did a panic of a moment lead Aharon to create the golden calf, the Jews to panic so badly, and really the devastation in the aftermath that followed? It's a beautiful Dvar Torah from a Rabbanit, Sorah Rosen in Israel, and she says the following. if you want to be a slave, you cannot think long term. And in the words of Professor Kahneman, it would be, you cannot use system 2, you need system 1. And so when Moses comes to Bnei Israel in Egypt, what do they say when they hear God wants to take them out? V'lo sham'u el Moshe mikotzer ruach v'lo sham'u b'nei Israel el Moshe mikotzer ruach u'me'avodah kasha. The Jews didn't listen to Moshe because they were overworked. What does that mean? Many rabbis ask. They say, wait, why aren't they listening? If they're enslaved and someone's telling them that they're going to be out, they should listen. No, because if you are a slave, you do not really use system 2. You're not able to afford to, because if you thought long term, it would be too depressing. You would despair. And so you're constantly using system 1. You're constantly, that is the operating way of a slave. And as the Jews come out and receive the Torah, they're still very much on that system 1 type of thinking. And so when they see that Moshe is boshesh, he is late, they immediately despair and they start looking for the egel. This type of thinking is not unique for what the Jews did in the desert. If you look in 1961, there was the episode of the Gulf of Tonkin, right off the country of Vietnam. A U.S. ship thought it was fired upon. It reported to President Johnson that they were fired upon, and indeed they were not. Based on this, Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Act, which led to the authorization of the Vietnam War, which claimed the lives of thousands of Americans, when in fact we today know that that ship was not fired upon. After 9/11, the American people panicked, and the Afghanistan and Iraq wars are widely agreed to have been wars that were not thought through enough. And so people sometimes use their national thinking using system 1 when in fact they should be using system 2. When Moses comes down and he breaks the tablets, he's not breaking them as an impulse. He's breaking them because he wants the Jews to realize that things do not come easily. In fact, this is why Rabbanit Rosen argues Moses moves his tent out of the camp of the Jewish people, and he immediately tells them, if you want to speak to God, if you want to seek God, you need to start making an effort. You need to start walking outside. And that's the lesson of the Chet HaEgel. It's a lesson of, as a nation, sometimes we have to be rehabilitated. We need to exit our system 1 type of thinking. We need to start thinking long term. And if something bad happens, we cannot afford to panic and respond in panic. We need to really give time and pause and thought to what's happening. That was the sin of the Chet HaEgel, and that's the type of Lo Sham'u el Moshe mikotzer ruach u'me'avodah kasha. The Jews didn't listen to Moses because they were too impatient and impulsive, when in fact it was time for them to transition into a long-term type of thinking. There's a beautiful explanation from the rabbi of the author of the book of Aktava Kabbalah, one of Germany's great rabbis. He says the word boshesh only appears twice in Tanakh, and of course we're talking about here the Egel, and it also appears with regard to Sisra. Boshesh is very different than the word Icher. Boshesh means delayed with no choice. You were forced to be delayed. And Icher is somewhat voluntary. When Sisra's mom sees he's not coming, she knows he didn't make that choice. Vayar ha'am ki boshesh. How can you see that someone is late? The people see, as if in fact that Moshe did not choose to be late. They see that it was something beyond his control. Boshesh, he's late. And so they say he didn't make that choice. It's been forced on him, and that's when they despair. So we can never ever use the system 1 thinking as a nation when we have the possibility of thinking long term, of thinking of other possibilities, and that's really what God does with us in 40 years in the desert. He helps us think more long term. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom.